chapter 9 is where we're at today. The book of Mark chapter 9. So I want to talk to you about faith where there seems to be no way. Faith where there seems to be no way. And so the book of Mark chapter 9, hold on to that. We will look at that in a minute here. And there was a woman who decided to go for a hike in Maui, Hawaii. And so she parked her car and she started walking into the forest. And just, thinking, hey, I'm just going to take a quick walk, hike, and I'll be back. And so she decided not to bring her phone and her wallet. And she basically left them inside her car. And so she started walking. And so then after about an hour, she decided to go back. And so she started heading back. Well, the problem was she took a wrong direction. She got lost in the middle of the forest. Well, here's the thing. This woman did not show up the following day in her car, and somebody found this abandoned car and called the police. And so then they reported a missing woman. Well, here's what happened. She was in the middle of this forest, lost. And one of the things that that she did, she found this river, and to stay hydrated, she started drinking this river water. And so she started walking, just trying to find her way, days, a week, trying to find her way back. Then in the middle of all of this, of being lost, in the middle of this forest, all of a sudden she fell off a cliff. Fell off a cliff. Injured herself badly. So now she, instead of her walking, now she's crawling and just having a hard time trying to survive this thing. And what happened was there was a helicopter trying to find her, and fortunately spotted her in the middle of this forest, and she was saved after 2 weeks. 2 weeks of being lost in the middle of the forest. And when the reporters asked the woman how she survived, she basically said, "You don't even know what I went through. In my situation, being injured, just lost in the middle of this forest, there was just no way for me to survive. I felt like there was no hope. I was so full of fear and just lost, wanting to give up." And the reporter asked her back, "Well, how come you didn't give up?" Well, she said, "Well, that was an option. In the middle of this, I had to choose either death or life. I chose life. I chose to survive." Have you been in a situation in your life, it seems like there was just no way out? The situation, it seems like it's just hopeless. Where there seems to be no way, you're like, man, there's just no hope. There's just no way out. I don't think there's any solution or any answers in this condition I'm in. Have you been there? In fact, there's so many stories in the Bible that tells us about some of these situations that it seems like there was just no hope. Do you remember when Moses and the people of Israel, they were in front of the Red Sea, and all of a sudden the Egyptians, the enemies, decided to pursue them and to destroy all of them. All of a sudden, they were in front of this sea, and behind them are their enemies. I mean, I want to tell you, there's just no way. It seems like there was just no way for them to survive. Nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. And then, do you remember the story about Daniel being thrown into the lion's den? Come on, a bunch of hungry lions. There was just no way to survive the ferocious animals. What about Shadrach, Abednego, and Meshach? When they were thrown into the fiery furnace, do you remember? Man, there's just no way for them to survive this scorching heat. No way. What about David? a young teenager. All of a sudden, he was in a battlefield face to face with this giant Goliath. And the Bible tells us that he was a very fierce warrior. There's just no way that David would defeat and survive the ruthless giant. And then there's the story about this woman who bled for 12 years. And she went to see, so many doctors, spent all her money. And the Bible tells us that instead of getting better, she gotten worse. It seems like there was just no hope for her to receive any type of healing or cure. Do you remember the man by the name of Lazarus who got sick and he died? And there was just no hope for him to come alive and see him alive again. Within the Assemblies of God, our denomination, there's this leader by the name of Greg Mundis. And my wife and I had prayed for him for so many days. And he's the head of the World Missions Director. And here's the story. He made national news. National news. It's simply because of his situation. So he contacted this virus. And what happened was he struggled to survive. In fact, the story tells us that he was in a hospital from March 16 and all the way to March 31st and not seeing that he was going to make it. Well, they moved him to Barnes Jewish Hospital in St. Louis. And from there, listen to this. He was in a ventilator for 34 days. And the doctor tells us that if a person is in ventilator for that many days, there's just no hope for him to survive. No hope. In the midst of this, he had a kidney failure. He started dialysis, and then he had blood clots. It's just crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. It seems like there's just no hope for him to survive. What do I want you to know? Here's what I want you to know. That God did a miracle on Greg's body, physical body, that he survived this affliction, and Greg is alive and well today. When the doctor said that there is no hope for him, and God did a miracle by parting the Red Sea. When the Egyptians were after to destroy the people of Israel, God did a miracle by parting the Red Sea, and the people of Israel walked on dry ground, and they saw a miracle. God shut the mouths of the hungry lions, and Daniel got out of the den alive and unharmed. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, come on, God put a hedge of protection upon these men, and the fire did not hurt them at all. And the Bible tells us not even a single hair was burnt. God gave David the strength and the power and the miracles. Come on, for a sling and a stone to defeat this giant, this mighty warrior named Goliath? God did a miracle. That's what I want you to know. I want you to know that Jesus himself, God himself in the flesh, healed the woman who bled for 12 years, and it seems like her situation had no hope. And then all of a sudden, Jesus heals her. And then Jesus raised this Lazarus from the dead. I mean, do you know that Lazarus had been dead for 4 days? 4 stinking days. Well, guess what? I'm assuming that he was pretty stinky after 4 days. And but God made a way where there seems to be no way. I want you to know that, friends. In a toughest situation, it seems like God's specialty is to show up and do a miracle. Imagine here for a moment. Imagine, now I want you to imagine this. Imagine that you are in a very bad situation, a hopeless situation, and God takes your broken life and turns your ashes into beauty. Imagine for a moment that you're struggling. It seems like there's no hope for your marriage. And all of a sudden, God does a miracle and restores your marriage. Imagine for a moment that your son and daughter are prodigals. And all of a sudden, it seems like there's just no hope for them. And all of a sudden, God does a miracle. Imagine for a minute that your daughter or your son is deep in drugs and alcohol. It seems like there's just no hope for them. And all of a sudden, God does a miracle, and they come back and loving Jesus, and they're doing well. And I want to tell you today, that is possible. That is possible. In the book of Mark, chapter 9, tells us a story about this young boy who had been demon-possessed for so long. And the father had this intense agony of seeing his son being possessed by an evil spirit. Now, let's look at it. Mark chapter 9, beginning from verse 14. When they came to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd around them and the teachers of the law arguing with them. As soon as all the people saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with wonder and ran to greet him. Jesus said, "What are you arguing with them about?" A man in the crowd answered, "Teacher, I brought you my son who is possessed by a spirit that has robbed him of speech. Whenever it seizes him, it throws him into the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, and becomes rigid. I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." So it seems like the father is just realizing, maybe there's just no hope for my son. My son had been struggling with this for so long. Maybe there's just no hope. I even asked a bunch of these dudes, and I thought that they were with Jesus, and they couldn't even do anything. Imagine. And Jesus said, "You unbelieving generation, how long shall I put up with you?" Wow. And then Jesus said, "Bring the boy to me." So they brought him. When the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. Can you just imagine this for a moment? I mean, this is some crazy stuff. Imagine that you are seeing this. And Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" The father replied, "It has often, or from childhood, it has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him." And just imagine, just seeing your son going through this. I don't know about you, but I would be agonizing seeing my son dealing with this stuff, and I couldn't do anything about it. And then look at this. He fell to the ground. But if you can do anything, Jesus said, the man said, "But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." So this is, look at me. So the father said, "If you can do anything, I'm really desperate. I'm really agonizing and seeing my son in this condition. I really need help. He needs help. I'm begging you, if you can, take pity on us." And Jesus replied, "If you can. But I want you to know that nothing is impossible to those who believe." Nothing is impossible for one who believes. And then look at this. This is how the father replied. "I believe, but help me with my unbelief." And you're like, "What?" "I believe, but help me with my unbelief." Okay, wait. It's either you believe or you don't believe. But here's what the father was saying to Jesus. "Jesus, I want you to know, you know my heart. I want to believe, and I think I do believe. But if you know my heart and I'm not there, and I still lack faith, will you help me to get there? Because I really want to believe. I want to believe that my son will be healed from this. And so, you know my heart. If my faith is not perfect, will you just take me there? I'm asking you, please take me there. That's a lot of times that's what we need to do. When we say, I have faith, I think I do. But if I don't, God, if I don't have enough faith, will you just take me there? Will you just give me that faith? Help me, God, to get there? Do you understand what I'm trying to say here? Is that the fact that the Father said he's being real. Jesus, I'm just being real. I want to believe. I want to have faith. But I think I do. But if I don't, help me to get there. And then look at this. Verse 25. When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the impure spirit. You deaf and mute spirit, I command you to come out of him and never enter him again. Verse 26, the spirit shrieked, convulsed him violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, he's dead. They thought he was dead. And then look at this. But Jesus took him by the hand. Jesus took him by the hand. You thought he was dead, but I want to show you he's alive and well, and he's healed. Come on now. And look at this, verse 28. Jesus had gone indoors. His disciples asked him privately, why couldn't we drive it out? He replied, this kind can come out only by what? Prayer. By prayer. Here's what you and I need to do. Here's what I need you to do. Number one is this. You have to remind yourself that nothing is impossible with God. Now look at me. This is what I need you to do. That you got to remind yourself that nothing is impossible with my God. In fact, I love what George Mueller said. He said, faith does not operate in the realm of the possible. There is no glory for God in that which is humanly possible. Faith begins where man's power ends. Number two, here's what I need you to do. You have to believe. You got to have faith. You have to believe. In the book of James chapter 1 verse 6 tells us, but when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not, what? Expect to receive anything from the Lord. So in other words, faith is vital. Your faith is so important that the fact that if you have faith, the Bible tells us that you will receive, that nothing will be impossible for you. But if you don't have faith, don't expect to receive anything from Him. I love what Isaiah 43 verse 9, because I'm telling you, there are so many promises of God in the Bible. But look at this specifically from Isaiah 43 verse 19. Look at this. I am making a way in the desert. And maybe perhaps your life, it feels like you are in a desert or in a wasteland. But I want you to know that God gave you a promise that I'm making a way in the desert and streams in the wasteland. And man, all day long, I will just take that and embrace that promise in faith. Are you with me? I got to have faith to understand that God will make a way in the desert and streams in the wasteland. Are you with me? God can make a way through the wilderness and cause streams to rise up, bringing refreshing even in the desert times. He can split the sea. And I'm telling you, He can move mountains or any barrier before us and allow us to walk through on the dry ground. He can conquer any giant and bring victory to His children. He can close the mouths of the lion, providing safety. He can open prison doors and set you free. He can protect us from the flames of adversity. He can carry us through any storm. He's the God of miracles. He's a supernatural God. He never changes. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Are you with me? Do you have the faith to believe this? Do you have the faith to believe this? Number three, sometimes, here's what I need you to know, sometimes you need sustaining faith. Sometimes you need sustaining faith. Sometimes God answers right away, and sometimes God doesn't. So what happens when God doesn't answer your prayers right away? Are you going to give up? Are you just going to say, forget you, God, and I'm just going to do my own thing? And by the way, if you start doing your own thing, I just want to warn you, you're going to be in much, much bigger problem. So what happens when God doesn't answer your prayers right away? Are you going to rebel? Are you, in fact, we are what I call a microwave generation. We want it now. And if you don't show up, God, forget you. I'm just going to do my own thing. Our very own Dave Frazee and Suzette and the whole family. About 6 months ago, Dave lost his job. And he began to apply in just wherever. I mean, they were willing to move anywhere just so that, because Dave had to provide for his family. And so I know Dave is watching in Suzette, but they know this. My wife and I and many others were actually praying against him moving, or their family moving somewhere else. We're selfish, man. We want to keep Dave and Suzette and the whole family. So we're just praying against it. So please forgive me, Dave, Suzette. But anyway, we were praying, God, provide for this family. And if you can, let them stay here. But here's what happened. During this time, fear was real. Worry was real. And thinking about, what are we going to do? Anxiety would set in and just worry and all that stuff. But I want to tell you, Dave told me that in the midst of all of this, God was sustaining them the whole time. The whole time. God was sustaining them. And he said to me that in the midst of all of this, the amazing part was that God brought me and my wife and the whole family closer to him. And then all of a sudden, in the midst of our worry and fear, God began to provide for our needs. Every month, we wouldn't miss our rent payment. We would have food on the table. And God just provided left and right for our needs. And do you know that Dave called me about a week and a half ago that he accepted a job? And the end of this month, he will be starting, guess where? Reno, Nevada. That's right. We're keeping them. We're selfish. We're keeping them. Romans chapter 8, verse 28 tells us this, friends. That all things, we know, that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. I don't know why God took 6 months to answer Dave's prayer. But one thing I know, that they needed a sustaining faith in this journey. That's what I need you to know. Number 4, I need you to know this. And I need you to do this. That you have to position yourself to receive from God. What does that mean? You have to position yourself. The Bible already tells us that if you lack, if you're doubting, you're not going to receive. So you got to have faith. We already know that. Number 2 is you got to be obedient. You got to have a life of obedience. There's just no way that God would bless you and help you if your life is completely out of his will. So you got to obey. I got to obey. I got to position myself into what he wants to do in my life, and for me to receive, I got to position myself by obeying. Number 3, I got to love him with all of my heart, mind, and soul. The Bible tells us that is the greatest and the first commandment of all is to love him with all of our heart, mind, and soul. So I got to position myself in faith, prayer is the next one. Mark chapter 9 tells us that the reason why that the evil spirit left. Jesus was so clear. This kind can come out only by prayer. So this is so important, guys. You have to position yourself to receive from him by your faith, by your obedience, by your love. And last is your prayers. I love this wooden wall art plaque with the quote. Look at this. Don't measure the size of the mountain. Talk to the one who can move it.